Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Winging It with the Wignalls.
Hello.
I'm Nikki.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be talking about being on drugs.
So many drugs.
Way! Intro music! So what we're talking about this week is our experience with drugs, but specifically with the medicated, prescribed kind to help with both of our neurospiciness. But before we get into that, it's just worth saying that we aren't doctors, surprise, surprise, and please don't take, anything we say here as kind of fact of how it's going to be for you. Please speak to your doctor. And this is just our experiences, what we found worked, and everyone is so unique. So it really is always worth speaking to your doctor and doing your own kind of trial and error until you get to the right drug, the right dose.
That's it. And when different people have different interactions, and they'll have, when we discuss side effects and, the experiences we had, realistically, everyone has different experiences. So yeah, this is literally just anecdotal evidence for how we've experienced the different medications.
Exactly that. So I think it's quite interesting that both of us started taking medication years apart from each other. But in both instances, we were quite nervous before we started taking the medication. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about why you were hesitant to start that first time?
Yeah, so I wasn't aware of people that had that were on medication, and essentially the only perspective or of what that looked like would be sort of TV and films. And when they show someone on medication, it's more like a chemical lobotomy than anything else. So my biggest concern was, would losing who I am, via this becoming a drug zombie, be worth it? But it was, they made certain that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, it was very similar for me. I think it was about 5 years later I started taking medication. Very similarly, was concerned that I would lose who I was. The people I was aware of being on medication when I was growing up were two friends of mine. My first ever relationship when one of my close friends at school were both ADHD. And they said that their medication just left them feeling numb. And I was concerned that I'd lose a lot of my creativity and a lot of the bubbly buzziness that comes with the ups. There's the doctors were saying it would help level out the downs, but I was concerned about being at that constant level and losing the joy and the euphoria and the creativity you get when things are going well. And I think also there was still just quite a bit of a stigma. This was about 6 years ago now, but people are a lot more open about taking medication than they have been before. And I think they've got a lot better at making sure they prescribe the right thing than they used to. So I'm aware of less situations where people are just being lobotomized, whereas it did seem to be more of a common thing. Also, at the point when I started taking medication for the first time was actually around the point I decided to come off the birth control pill for the first time, because I realised I'd been on it since I was 16. I've been on it for nearly 16 years by that point, for half my life, and I thought, I just don't know who I am without all of these chemicals in my body. So I've been made the decision to start trying to come off that and find more natural ways for birth control. So it felt very counteractive to that journey to then introduce chemicals in another form. And so I found that quite difficult to get my head around. So that was some of the reasons for both of us why we were just feeling it was a tough decision, I think, in both instances for us to actually make the call the first time. And
that's it. And you'll realise that for both of our situations there was kind of a build up and then a sort of a breaking point of something needs to change, which then led to going down that journey. Whereas realistically it might be more comfortable for people to consider this as an option before it gets to that breaking point.
That's a really good point. Yeah. That's a really nice segue to talking about why we both started taking drugs. So Chris, do you want to share what was going on for you kind of in the build up for you taking medication, and what was finally that thing that made you decide to give it a go?
Yeah, so prior to that, I just wanted some mental stability. Um, you can't really build up from an unstable foundation, or you can't build a house on quicksand. Um, so my moods, if you are able to, visualize a graph split into four, and you've got energy high and low on one axis, and then mood high and low on the other. Um, sort of high energy, high mood would be a mania state. And you've got high energy, um, low mood, which would be like that anger and rage.
Kind of rage, yeah.
That's it. That's it. And then you've got sort of low energy but high mood. Be like that sort of content, present in the moment. You're just enjoying being. And then the low mood, low energy is kind of that depression and despair. And for the most part, if you just scrap away the high mood bit, I had a lot of wildly oscillating between high and low energy and various levels of low mood, which was very disruptive for me because, you know, some things you're able to do in various states of mind and other things not. So getting consistency for doing exercise or, just getting chores done and things like that became very difficult. Um, if you're in that sort of, for me, was in that rage state where you physically can't sit still and pacing around just, you can feel like your skin's on fire with how angry you are, or you're just so depressed, you get in from work, you get into bed and you don't get out until your alarm goes off for the next work day.
I remember you doing a lot of rage cleaning, using that as
Yeah,
fuel
well,
to actually.
this is it. This is it. That's probably why when I do everything, I do it far too aggressively. Is I started channeling that sort of rage, anger into doing chores and try and be a little bit productive. But now I just break the tools I'm using.
Even though the rage isn't there anymore,
The
the
rage, the
energies are
rage
still
isn't
behind
there.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. It's the only way I know how to. Um, And so, on the very rare occasion, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I would have a sudden spike in positive mood, which it sounds great. And it would feel like all of the positive feelings I was meant to have throughout the year just dumped on me in one go. But that was very destructive because that's when I'd spend lots of money. I'd sign up for, a new phone contract and have a new phone. I'm pretty sure within one of those, I bought a new guitar. Like that was you know, I do what I want. I'm a treat myself sort of vibe. It felt absolutely amazing. It'd be euphoric for a couple of days. But that's again,
Not sustainable.
no, exactly that, exactly that. So my primary thing was to just find a baseline to work from. Um, but as they say that you collect people that are similar to yourself. A lot of friends that I've sort of collected and have are also neurodivergent and have their own collection of various issues. And at one point, in close succession, two of them committed suicide, which was particularly rough for our group. And we were, as a group, we were generally not doing great, and that was kind of a an eye opener to this is how bad some of the people in the group were feeling, and having that self reflection of, okay, well actually the things I'm doing and the things my mind are feeling are not good. They're not positive. So it was kind of at that point that I sort of decided, actually, yeah, maybe I should look towards doing something, medically to figure things out.
Realizing how dangerous it can be if it's.
This is it. This
Yeah.
is it. That's the thing. It's that danger, to oneself or to other people. So yeah, how about you?
I mean, you kind of touched on the fact that both of us were at breaking point. That's very much what it felt like for me. And I'd never really considered medication before. I think when me and you were going out, the focus was always very much around your mental health. And then I got in another relationship, and you kind of get that new relationship high and euphoria. And for a long time, I genuinely did not think that there was anything wrong with me, even though I had had this kind of history of anxiety and finding university challenging, you know, all this back stuff. You almost forget it when things are good for a while. So it really came out the blue for me, where work had got really hard, was very overwhelming. Where I was working at the time, we got new management and they were expecting incredibly long hours, and it was very high pressure. And actually the head of my team was quoted saying she thinks people use mental health as an excuse not to do their job properly. So that was the sort of environment. And I think I was just getting to the point of coming out of the honeymoon part of my relationship I was in at the time, and realizing actually everything isn't going to be perfect and sunshine and roses all the time. Life is challenging. And I had just got my lovely dog Baloo, which is something I'd wanted my whole life, like a little puppy of my own. I had my family dog growing up who I adored, but I was so excited to get my baby, my first dog. And we brought home this little bundle of teeth and didn't sleep and howling. It just wasn't what I was expecting at all. The breeder actually calls it post-pupple depression. Apparently quite a few people get it. Where you're just not sleeping, and the last thing Billy wanted to do was curl up on my lap and have a sleep like you see in all the videos of puppies. He just wanted to be destroying everything or biting my fingers, biting my toes. I was constantly covered in all these little pinprick marks, and they've got like little razor teeth at that age. And I think just the combination of work being so incredibly overwhelming, the rose-tinted glasses starting to come off in the relationship, and then this thing I'd wanted for so long not working out in the way I'd expected it to. I just had this massive crash. I was incredibly low. I got signed off work for 3 weeks because I just couldn't stop crying whenever I was sat at my desk. If what I planned to have for dinner wasn't in the fridge, I would end up just sitting on the floor crying. My temper was very up and down as well, which is one of the things I really hate about myself. I always know that's kind of crisis point if I start to get angry, because that's not an emotion that I like to put on other people ever. I realised that I needed to do something, but I didn't really know. And then it was during that time of being signed off work that a younger member of my family passed away very, very unexpectedly, very suddenly. I remember so vividly my mum phoning me to tell me, and I just couldn't believe it. And that was kind of the icing on top of the emotional exhaustion, burnout, overwhelm cake. I just could not deal with it, and ended up going to the doctor. And I think around that point, because of everything I've been going through at work, I had been seeing an occupational health lady who was incredibly lovely. And it was her who kind of mentioned this generalized anxiety disorder thing, which sounded like it fit. And I got referred to cognitive behavioural therapy through the NHS, which is very helpful. I've done several rounds throughout the years, and I have found it helpful. But it is also a little bit like sticking a Band-Aid on an open wound. It doesn't necessarily fix the original problem. I was struggling to sleep because I would just lie in bed with thoughts racing. I was having a lot of panic attacks, finding it very difficult to leave the house. So when I went to the doctor, they said, yeah, it sounds like generalized anxiety disorder, and suggested that I start taking medication just to try and get back to a point where I could start functioning again. It was never meant to be a permanent thing. It was kind of meant to be a bit of a temporary fix. And the doctor did say to me at the time, it's not just a stand-alone fix. You have to do this in combination with counselling and therapy and self-work, but it will give you that mental space to actually do that stuff. So I started taking sertraline as what I was prescribed. And I was very lucky that it was still when I was in my patch of being signed off, because at the start, it is a bit of a roller coaster when you start a new medication. Is that something that you found, Chris?
I'm surprised that sertraline was the one they went with you first. Yeah. So the first one that I was put on was citalopram, which I believe is quite a common first one to go on. I didn't have any side effects that I noticed, which was fantastic. You just kind of start noticing your mood lift and stabilize a little bit, which is great. However, one thing that does happen is it just stops working after about a year, which we kind of figured out when I went off on a bit of a bender into London, not telling anyone, and just, yeah,
Didn't come home one night.
didn't come home. And then I was like, maybe I need to see if, what's meant to be curbing these self-destructive urges are working. And actually, that's citalopram's good for the temporary relief of depression, anxiety, etc. And here's what they'll give someone, because it is easy to get onto, easy to get off of, and it doesn't matter that it stops working after a year, because the expectation is that you're not going to be on it for long.
You'll have fixed yourself by then, surely.
This is it. So the second one I was put on was metazapam, which this one did do a chemical lobotomy on me. I don't remember most of the time I was on metazapam, which was really frustrating. I remember that I was doing Open University at the time, and I just couldn't remember anything. So I failed a couple of modules whilst I was on it. Just nothing was sticking in my brain. Conversations I'd have with people, I would go and have the same conversations, and my friends started realizing that I was having the same genuine first-time reaction to news. So, they'd come and tell me good news or something, and then it would be as though I've, heard it for the first time, and they'd mention, oh, we've told you this before. That's when you start doubting your own mind and your own memory. It really wasn't pleasant. When I went to the doctor to say about the memory issues that I was having, they said, okay, cool, we'll take you off this and go on to something else. Because it was a different doctor at the time, they really queried why the first one had put me on metazapam, purely, and they described it as like a bazooka for the brain. It's for other issues. And
it's so frustrating when you speak to a different doctor and then they say, well, why have you been taking this, or why did they tell you that? That's obviously not the case. It's like, there's not very much consistency sometimes, which can be difficult to know. You should just be able to trust them, and I think a lot of the time that's the case, but sometimes it's almost worth getting a second opinion if it's a big thing.
Yeah, so that's it. And I'm coming off of it. I'm not a particularly emotional person, or generally quite stoic, but I was just crying my eyes out for weeks on end.
It also coincided with our last breakup.
That's
Chris
it.
trying to come off metazapam, which is not ideal for anyone to have to try and go through.
So yeah, that was, wake up, have a cry, go to work, have a cheeky cry in the toilets, come back home, have a little cry, just do anything, cry. It was a little bit pathetic, but
big boys can cry too.
Yes.
And the really bizarre thing about that is that it's almost like, even though Chris was having problems with short-term memory at the time, now that whole year that he was on metazapam has almost just been erased. So It's very bizarre, particularly when we got back together and we're trying to kind of unpick challenges, clashes that we'd had before to make sure they wouldn't happen again. Almost a whole year of our previous 5-year relationship with each other was just gone. Like, there's nothing there. It's like this white space of a year.
That's it. It's just been deleted from my mind, or just wasn't written to begin with. Yeah. And actually, it's since then I have a lingering self-doubt of my own mind, which is very frustrating. I like being able to have confidence in my brain, and having that, oh, well, maybe my memory's bad, or what if everything I'm saying is completely false because I've just remembered it wrong or something. So, yeah. But yeah, then finally I went on to, got onto sertraline, which is the third of the 4 big ones, the last one being Prozac. which I haven't been on. And sertraline is particularly rough going onto it. There's symptoms sort of nausea. I felt a bit spaced out. I even had my balance and motor functions were a little bit weird. And bearing in mind, you would get these symptoms every time you went up a dose. So you go up. Do you start on 25 or 50 milligrams?
Yeah, I think it depends what the doctor.
Sure. Well, I'm currently now on 150 milligrams, so doing that many stops each way, and you've got to do like 6 weeks or something on each one. So it was a long time feeling those rough side effects. But it's great being on. It gives me that perfect sort of levelness of my mental clarity. And also where I had the concern that I would just be a sort of a numb zombie and less of me, I feel that being on sertraline, I have the mental space to be more of my personality, because it's not clouded over with all of the negative bits and pieces and all that turbulence. Interestingly, after a couple of years on that, I dated someone who, because I was feeling good and they were a little bit more hippie and kind of anti-drugs or anti-medications and things, convinced me to come off of it. Wasn't necessarily the right decision, but went for it. And
Please speak to your doctor before coming off any medication. Please don't do it just because a girlfriend or partner has asked you to.
well, this is it. I did speak to the doctor, and they said,
Okay.
"Oh, are you sure?" And I was like, "Well, I've got a really good friends and support network."
Yeah.
Because of the the suicides in our group. Our group of friends are really good at like looking out for each other. So I felt, I was in safe hands, whatever. So I can now say that coming off of sertraline is worse than going on. Not only do you have that very rough nausea, but I had what I call and what other people call brain zaps. When speaking to a doctor about it, I don't believe it's actually like an official thing, but what it feels like is an electric shock from your skull to your brain, and it was just happening all the time for about 3 or 4 weeks. And that was very, very uncomfortable. And then, after about 6 months, I realized actually I'm now sinking in mood and getting more irritable and angry and just much more scatty. So then went back on. So I probably lost about 2 years of mental stability. But you've got to do these things with that journey. So other side effects, penis related side effects, being the medical term being delayed ejaculation, which is it just takes a while to finish, which may or may not be beneficial to you. It can be a little bit frustrating, but with that, you very much learn that sex isn't just about having sex so you can finish, and you appreciate it for the act itself. So, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing. Interestingly, combined with that, on the first time I was on sertraline, would just be like hair trigger erections, and they just last for hours. Just anything set it off. Which, I mean, if I was less autistic, I could 100% have used that very effectively while I was single and dating, but I wasn't, so I didn't.
The idea was probably horrifying.
No, literally, that's it. That's it. If I was messaging a new lady, just seeing that I'd had a message at my desk, just immediately full flagpole. Yeah, it was it wasn't great.
Yeah, I had a number of similar side effects going on sertraline, none of them penis related. For me, I started off at 50 and I had absolutely no warning from my doctor that it might be a difficult journey starting the medication. So that was all a bit of a shock for me. And actually, when I mentioned it, they said that shouldn't be the case at all. And then when I Googled it, hundreds of Reddit, various different chat threads about...
That surprises me. I was given a lot of warning, like, if you need to, take some time off work, like, because it can be rough for people.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? But yes, I started it just towards the end of that 3 weeks of being signed off. So I was obviously due to go back to work pretty quickly. And it was surreal. I remember not being able to control my eyeballs and feeling like my eyes were just rolling back in my head. I was so spaced out.
Wow.
Felt like I was on drugs, basically. And had my sign-off continued another week and then tried to go back in. And I just so remember my colleagues laughing at me because they were talking to me, and I was just looking at them like I didn't understand what they were saying. And I went to go and make myself a porridge and ended up pouring the porridge all down my front because I kept missing my mouth with the spoon.
Wow.
I was just so out of it. So very quickly made the call that I wasn't ready to be back at work, and luckily was able to get my sign off. I can't remember how long I was off in the end, but it did go on for quite a while, but was needed. I really did try to carry on, and aside from the fact I still had a lot psychologically to work through, just physically my body was not working. But I was on that dose for, I think, about 4 months. I started a new job and I moved house. And for me, I find change is something that can distract from underlying issues, because then I get that dopamine hit, something shiny and new.
Shiny.
Yeah. So I was like, this is brilliant. This is working. I'm fixed. Everything's great. And then I realized it wasn't. And I still had an awful lot to work through emotionally. Again, the same trend that work got busier and busier, and I was feeling more and more overwhelmed and hit what I now recognize as ADHD burnout, where just I couldn't make any decision, was crippling, and I'd get back from work and I'd just sit on the sofa and I couldn't move until it was time for bed, and then do it all again. So I went back to the doctor and said, this was working, but it's not cutting it anymore. So they doubled my dose. And again, there was no warning. Doubling the dose would bring back the symptoms. So I found myself going through it again. Nowhere near as bad as going on it, but a lot of nausea, finding it very hard to focus. Again, I remember trying to eat and drooling because I was just such a mess. And the thing that was really tricky that time was I was also going through the elimination diet to try and figure out other issues that were ongoing. And I had been taking lansoprazole because I have like Chris, we're hiatal hernia, matchies. Lansoprazole is an antacid that kind of helps line your stomach a little bit and protects it, which is something they tell you to take when you take antidepressants anyway. But because I was going through this elimination diet, I've been told to stop taking it. And where, the different departments aren't really having conversations or cross-referencing, no one picked up on the fact that, and I didn't know, that I should be on it for the sertraline. So particularly when I then started taking that double dose, I suddenly started projectile vomiting once or twice a week out of the blue, and it would just be like acid. I had no idea what was going on. And I thought it was related to this elimination diet stuff because I was seeing someone for my gut health. And that went on for about 3-4 months. I'll just be sat at my desk and just suddenly it would just erupt from nowhere. And then absolute agonizing stomach pains afterwards. And finally, this was in lockdown. So it was lots of virtual chats with doctors rather than seeing someone. And it was actually through the Livy app, which I got through work at the time. And it was someone that wasn't trying to get me out the door in 10 minutes. And they went back through all of my records to kind of establish exactly all the different things that were going on and looking at more holistically rather than just one individual symptom. And it was her that clocked, you've been told to stop taking this antacid. You've then had your dose of sertraline doubled. This is what's making you feel like that. And as soon as I went back on the lansoprazole, so much better. But it was very frustrating that I'd had like 4 months at that point of just really bad pain and but luckily it was during lockdown, so it's not like I had anywhere to go, but I would have rather have spent time not lying on my bathroom floor. But all of that made me realize that it is so worth trying to talk to more than one person about these things. Like medication, particularly for something you're going to be on for a while, is a big decision. It can have a lot of impact. It can be amazing, which we will get onto. But just making sure you're prepared and reading what's out there, but getting experiences from people that have actually been there, they've actually taken it, particularly if they've stuck with it. I noticed there were a lot of people that got to the side effects of starting and then just bailed and were just saying, this is the worst thing ever, why would anyone do that? And never gave themselves the chance to get over that initial hump. But it is good kind of being prepared for what's to come.
That's it, yeah. And possibly, if you can have some soothing techniques, whether it be medications or something that you can take to alleviate symptoms, being able to take some time off work, not having huge amounts of responsibilities for those couple of months is, those couple of months of unpleasantness is completely worth it if you're going to be, in a really good state of mind for the following years. So yeah, very much recommend that. Is the side effects shouldn't be something that should put you off.
Yeah, I think it's worth being aware of them so it doesn't completely catch you off guard and you're not about to do, you're not planning on getting married in a few weeks, say, or
yes.
But yes, when you get through that over the hump, for both of us in our experiences, everyone's going to be different, but I think Chris phrased it really well when he said it felt like he could suddenly be more of himself. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel like it's taken the edge off the anger I can get when I'm overstimulated. It's taken the edge off the depression I can get when I'm overstimulated, and also just the edge off that anxiety that I was feeling as well. That's one of the nice things about sertraline, is that it's for both anxiety and depression. So for both of us, it seems to have really helped two of the challenges that we were having. And after I'd been on this high dose for not even a year, I was feeling like I did a lot of work during that time, a lot of therapy, a lot of counselling, a lot of CBT, and I was starting to feel a lot more in control. And also it was during lockdown. And actually there's nothing like not having all that external stimulation and not having to leave your house or sit in a busy office or socialise with people.
I'm not going to lie, I loved it.
Yeah. It was probably like up there in the best I felt mental health wise, which I know is so different from the experience of many people, but it allowed me to get into a really good place. So the side effects of being on that higher dose of things like the challenges with orgasms, and it was impacting my sleep, and there was sometimes that baseline nausea might come back into play. So I spoke to my doctor and decided to not come off altogether, but just really reduce my dose. And again, that was a bit of a journey, but doing it a little at a time is definitely the way to go. I actually spoke to 2 different doctors that time, and it was the second one that said that, and I was so glad of halving the dose each time. Don't just drop down a massive amount, or not even halving it, less than that. And I read a lot of advice from forums of people that have been through it, and I just did it so slowly because I think it is very dangerous to stop altogether. I would be surprised if any doctor recommended that. But
there's serotonin syndrome, which can, in very extreme cases, cause death. So yes, it's just stopping altogether can be, at best, very uncomfortable, and at worst, life-ending.
Yeah, so even though saying we're not a doctor and we're not here to give advice, if I could give any advice, it would be please speak to your doctor before making any decisions around medication, whether it's starting, increasing, decreasing, or ending it. But I'm now on a very low dose of sertraline, which I find for me is that real sweet spot of managing the edges of my more intense symptoms, side effects. And even though it now doesn't feel like generalized anxiety disorder was the right diagnosis, and I probably was just looking at ADHD all the time, sertraline is still something they can prescribe to help with some of the side effects of that. So I was just quite lucky that that's the one that I've ended up on. Who knows, once I get my official diagnosis, they might shift me onto something else, but for now it really seems to be doing the trick. But what about you? Like, how do you feel now with where you are with your journey of medication?
Yeah, I feel really good. One thing I will note, I think it's worth noting, is that you're just over 5 foot, whereas I'm just under 6 foot and built like a brick shithouse. I've also got generally quite a high, very high metabolism as well. So when we're talking about how the doses and going up and down and what we need. I'm on a high dose because my body more than likely just burns through it a lot quicker.
That's really worth mentioning.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, you wouldn't want to, little lady as yourself to be whacking on the maximum dosage. Whereas I'm pretty sure I didn't really feel anything until about the 100 milligram level. But yeah, I feel good. Not generally pretty stable. And there are still ups and downs, but that's good because it lets you know that you haven't just been wiped clean or become numb.
You're still
You're
feeling.
still feeling. Yeah. It's not a case of, okay, well, I'll take these and I don't have to bother with mental self-care. So yeah, I mentioned previously that I can get very lethargic if I don't do enough exercise. I find working out it has lots of positive effects on me aside from just the physical. It helps me sleep, puts me in a lighter mood, and all of this. And the fact that I almost need to do that, for me, I see that as a signifier that a signal that the dose that I'm on is right, because as you said, it takes a lot of the negative bits away, but I've got to do that last little 20%, which is much more manageable.
Takes the intensity
Exactly,
off
exactly,
the
exactly.
peaks, but yeah.
That's it. That's it. It takes the peaks off of everything, stabilizes it out. And yeah, my plans moving forward are I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'll have to figure out the acid reflux situation because lansoprazole isn't good for going on long term. No, I think I've been on it for about 5 years, so it affects bone density. And I changed doctors when we moved here, discussed it with them, and they said, "Oh yeah, you really want to get off that because that if you're on it for a long time can promote the early onset of dementia." Now, me, when I'm doubting my memory anyway, is dementia's definitely not one I want to jump in there. But anyway, but aside from that, all's good. How about you?
Yeah, like Chris, I feel like I'm in quite a good place. So it's a difficult one. I love the idea of getting to a point where I don't have any external chemicals in my body, but I'm realizing I might have to give up on that because there's been a numerous other things I've been collecting that I now take stuff for. At some point, we'd really like to have a kid, and that's going to be a conversation of whether it's better for the little one to kind of be growing while there's some drugs and medication in my body, or if me trying to come off and going through peaks in anxiety and when hormones are more triggered anyway, whether that's actually going to be just as detrimental. So that's a conversation that I will have with a GP when the time comes. And also, once I finally get this ADHD diagnosis, they might actually want to trial me on something that's more specific for ADHD. So I'm not sure at the moment. I'm quite happy with how things are for now, but that doesn't mean it's something that's worth kind of reassessing and checking in with yourself semi-regularly. Yeah. Hopefully that's been a little bit helpful for people, whether or not you've been thinking that maybe you might need medication, but worried to go on it. I definitely recommend not doing what me and Chris did and don't wait till crisis mode, because it can be a lot harder to come back from that. Or if maybe you're going through the early symptoms of trying to get used to something, there is another side. You will come through it.
That's the thing. I don't know if it was explicitly stated, was that when your body gets used to the medication, the beginner side effects do wear off and they stop. You stop having them.
There's one or two that can be ongoing, but most of them, like the really intense stuff.
That's it, yeah.
And then, for both of us, it's the benefits have far outweighed that couple of months of not feeling great.
So, yeah, very much so.
Cool. So, as per tradition, we'll end on a little bit of positivity. Chris, what are you looking forward to most this week? He's broken. He shut down. He doesn't know.
I didn't know. It wasn't one of the headings. deviating from script. Yeah, nothing that I'm necessarily ultra excited about.
There's your positivity for you, folks. Take that into the week. If you think that you can do better than Chris, bring some positivity. Drop us a comment on Spotify or on our Instagram and let us know what you're looking forward to this week. And we hope you find this episode helpful and will join us for our one next week.
Wait, hang on. What are you looking forward to next week?
I don't know. I didn't think about it. Thanks, guys. Bye.
You're silly. Outro music. So how do we move on from my dick? Was that an overshare? Is this the audio version of sending a dick pic? Unsolicited. Like... I mean, we can cut it out if you like, but... We're adults having an adult conversation.
You like this?